Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you on Tuesday, the 3rd of November. Bangladesh civil society calls for arrest of bloggers' killers. Curfew continues in Nepal's southern border after violence. And arrested underworld Don Chhota Rajan to be extradited to India, says Interpol. And now for all the details. Civil society and activists observed a shutdown in Bangladesh against the increase in attacks on secular writers. 5 writers have been hacked to death in the country for their alleged criticism on Islam this year alone.
Activists of the Gano Jagaran Mancha or People's Resurgence Platform of Bangladesh assembled at capital Dhaka's Shahbag Square on Tuesday to denounce the continued killing of free thinkers in the country. Various student groups and civil society members also joined the protest. The Gano Jagaran Mancha had also held a vigil late on Monday against the increase in targeted attacks.
This is a protest against, the ongoing killing that is happening in Bangladesh. In this year, we have already lost 5 of free thinker, that is publisher, blogger, and writers.
The Gano Jagaran Mancha, which was formed out of Shahbag Square movement in 2013, seeking capital punishment for war criminals of 1971, has been ever since championing liberal and secular views in the country amid rising radicalism. Faisal Arafin Dipan, who ran a publishing house in Dhaka, was hacked to death on Saturday and became the latest victim of the extremist groups. He was the publisher of Bangladeshi American atheist writer Avijit Roy, who was hacked to death in April. Since then, several bloggers and online activists who were also supporters of Mancha were killed in a similar way. Ansarullah Bangla team, a banned Al-Qaeda-inspired outfit, has claimed responsibility of most of the killings.
It is not the right time to work for the revival of Afghan reconciliation process, Pakistan government has said. Pakistan was the facilitator of the first ever peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban in June.
The Afghan government and Taliban need to be convinced about the usefulness of the peace process for a successful dialogue, Pakistan Prime Minister's advisor on foreign affairs, Sartaj Aziz, has said. He added that a favourable atmosphere needs to be created before Pakistan begins its efforts to work for the revival of reconciliation process. Preconditions for a successful outcome are required, and that requires consensus on both sides. The Afghanistan government is one of the sides and the Taliban are the other, and they have to come to a situation in which they think that useful discussions can take place, Aziz said. The remarks come at a time when the two sides are engaged in a fierce standoff across Afghanistan following the breakdown of the peace talks. The highly anticipated negotiations, which were aimed at ending the decades-long conflict in Afghanistan, had collapsed following the death of Taliban Supreme Leader Mullah Omar. The subsequent leadership crisis which followed has posed a bigger challenge for the Ashraf Ghani government, as the Taliban has shown no willingness for talks. Islamabad, which hosted the first round of talks, had recently said that it was ready to facilitate further dialogue if the two sides were willing.
The indefinite curfew imposed in southern Nepal entered its second day on Tuesday following clashes between police and protesters on Monday. Meanwhile, fuel-starved Nepal has started receiving supplies from China after the two sides entered into a deal last week.
Southern Nepal's Birganj remained tense even on Tuesday amid the strict curfew imposed in the region. On Monday, clashes had broke out between police and Madhesi protesters, resulting in the death of an Indian citizen. Over a dozen of protesters were also injured in the police firing. The Indian embassy in Kathmandu had expressed concern over the death of its citizen and said they are closely monitoring the situation. Even as the protest continues along the border with India, Nepal received its second consignment of fuel on Tuesday. Over a dozen of Nepal tankers reached the country, bringing the much-needed petroleum supplies. Nepal Oil Corporation, which began importing Chinese oil last week, said private vehicles and taxis will be provided petroleum within the couple of days. The government had earlier imposed strict ration on petrol ever since the supplies from India was cut off. But the Madhesi groups who are protesting against the new constitution have been blocking key supply routes between India and Nepal, causing a fuel crisis in the country.
Pakistan has banned media coverage of Mumbai attack mastermind Hafiz Saeed-led Jamaat-ud-Dawa and 71 other proscribed groups. The move comes under the National Action Plan aimed at curbing militancy inside Pakistan.
Acknowledging Jamaat-ud-Dawa or the JUD to be a wing of the Lashkar-e-Taiba for the first time, Pakistan has called on broadcasters to refrain from covering the outfit as part of a crackdown on terrorism. The JUD has been accused of carrying out the dreaded 2008 Mumbai attacks in which 166 people were killed. All satellite TV channels, FM radio licensees are therefore strictly directed not to give any kind of coverage to any proscribed organisation, including Jamaat-ud-Dawa, Falah-e-Insaniyat Foundation and Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Pakistan Electronic Media Regulatory Authority or PEMRA said. This is also for the first time that a Pakistan government department has admitted that JUD and Falah-e-Insaniyat are other wings of Lashkar-e-Taiba. The move comes days after Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's US visit, where he assured US President Barack Obama to take action against UN-designated terrorists in the country. The United Nations had declared JUD a terror outfit and Saeed as a terrorist in December 2008. The United States has already put $10 billion bounty on Saeed's head, who however roams around freely in Pakistan as the government claims there is no case against him.
Staying on news from the country, Pakistan government and intelligence agencies are behind the recent spike in violence in southern Sindh province, Sindhi leaders have claimed. The indigenous people here have for long complained that their homeland is being demographically re-engineered against their will.
The World Sindhi Congress recently held a conference in London where they discussed the growing roots of terrorism in Pakistan. The speaker said the country is becoming increasingly dangerous for religious and ethnic minorities. They said the existence of the Sindhi people is facing threat due to an influx of outsiders into the province. Sindhi refers to the indigenous people of Pakistan's southern Sindh province. There is an estimated 45 million ethnic Sindhis living in Pakistan. Although majority of them identify as Muslims, around 16% are Hindus. The speakers expressed concern over the growing violence in Sindh.
कंडीशन तमाम वर्स है हर हवाले से तालीम के हवाले से सेहत के हवाले से स्पेशली एक्सट्रीमिटिज्म के हवाले से ताज़ो वाक़ियो जेको जेकबाद में थियो जैमें तमाम घणा माण्हुनि जी डेथ थी बम ब्लास्ट थियो इहो सिंध में पहिरियों कोन हुयो सिंध तमाम अमन पुरअमन ऐं सुफ़िज़म जो धरती हुई पर अॼु इहो कुझु थिए पियो उन जो ज़िम्मेवार पाकिस्तान जी गवर्नमेंट
Sindhi leaders have for long accused the government in Islamabad of promoting migration of outsiders. They say that the recent discovery of coal and other mineral have worsened the situation, threatening the existence of the indigenous people.
Pakistan authorities have said that they are mulling on plans for the repatriation of 1.5 million Afghan refugees. Strained bilateral relations between the two countries are being cited as the reason behind the move.
Pakistan is planning to repatriate 1.5 million Afghan refugees in a phased manner in the next 2 years, ruling out the extension of the December 31 deadline for their legal stay in the country. The repatriation plan will go before the cabinet for approval this week. The refugees form the largest protracted refugee population globally. Reports say there are another 1 million undocumented Afghans living illegally in Pakistan. Most of them migrated to Pakistan decades ago to escape persecution from the hardline Taliban regime and have been living in cities like Peshawar. They make a living by engaging in minuscule jobs or running small businesses. Because of their status, the Afghan refugees have always come under suspicion of terror links. The decision to deport the asylum seekers comes at a time when the two countries are embroiled in tensions over Pakistan's continued support to the Taliban. While Afghan refugees complain they are unwanted in Pakistan for various reasons, rising anti-Pakistan sentiment in Afghanistan is fueling anger against Afghan refugees.
Indian underworld don and fugitive Chhota Rajan, who was arrested in Bali last week, will be deported to India on Tuesday night, Interpol authorities have said. The process of his deportation had met with complication due to the lack of formal extradition treaty between India and Indonesia. He is expected to be produced before Indian court, where Indonesian police will submit details of cases in India. Rajendra Nikalje, widely known as Chhota Rajan, has been on Interpol's wanted list since 1995 for running a crime syndicate that engaged in extortion, arms smuggling and contract killing. He had been on run for decades. With just days to go for the historic elections in Myanmar, the minority Muslim community has high hopes. The Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar have suffered persecution for decades in the majority Buddhist country.
As Myanmar is upbeat about the general elections on Sunday, many Muslims are deprived of voting rights as they are not recognized as citizens. Two of the main political parties, the ruling Union Solidarity and Development Party and Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, have not granted election tickets to Muslim candidates. Muslim groups also allege that a number of candidates from the community have been disproportionately disqualified from running in the election. Despite the setbacks, many said they hope for a better future.
Islam Bada when the Queen Yeri, Toromyamia, Social Media, Dinity Twiniari. Airo, Generua, Mulena, Talame, Suya, General Islam Badao, the Cha, Korean Badao, Hindu Badao, Alum Badarigo. 2 years Yati Yari, Queen Yeri, a Pipu General Dulare. Ailu Suya, Mulena.
The 1.3 million Rohingya Muslims who mostly live in Rakhine province are not considered as citizens or do not enjoy equal rights as they are seen as migrants from Bangladesh. They have regularly come under attacks by radical groups. This had left hundreds dead and more than 100,000 displaced who have been living in refugee camps. Earlier this year, thousands had fled the country on boats to neighboring countries. But many died midway after their boats went astray, leaving them in the open sea for months.
The Maldives government has claimed that a bomb was recovered and deactivated near the president's official residence. This comes a month after an explosion took place at President Abdul Yamin's speedboat.
Maldives National Defence Force confirmed that the suspected device found near the president's residence of Muliash in capital Malé was an improvised explosive device. The remote-controlled bomb was recovered from a parked vehicle. This comes a day after the US Federal Bureau of Investigation or FBI released a report finding no conclusive evidence of bomb being used in an explosion on President Yamin's boat. In September, an explosion occurred at President Yamin's boat while returning from Hajj, where his wife and 2 aides sustained injuries. Maldivian authorities had claimed that it was an assassination attempt on the president. Last week, Vice President Ahmad Adib was arrested on treason charges for his alleged role in the boat blast.
Well, that's the way it was in South Asia this evening. Before we conclude, the top stories once again. Bangladesh civil society calls for arrest of bloggers' killers. Curfew continues in Nepal's southern border after violence. And arrested underworld don Chhota Rajan to be extradited to India, says Interpol. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/SAsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @SAsiaNewsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Good night.